by.
Yeah. Um, and well, yeah, why don't you just take it away? I've shared your background a little bit with them last week.
Well, it's great to be here, and um, I've always been appreciative of the work that Terry and all the folks at Fertile Ground do here because they are 100% ahead of the curve of everything in the state about sustainability, doing the right thing, and the work that we need to do to a place that really um, has been destroyed like no other environmentally with the oil industry and all the things that I've come to understand at a higher level over 6 years of due diligence of being back here in Oklahoma. And and so being a business person too, I was like, these folks are just ahead of what is going to happen. And that's a great place to be, and especially in a city as big as Oklahoma City has grown to be, and the necessity for us to be working on sustainability. Sustainability is just farming. It's the long game. It is knowing that we have to take care of what we have, and if we don't, um, the environmental pollution and things, which is the things that really bother me the most, is it's uh, it's killing people, and it has been for a long time. The people that live, especially in rural parts of our state, that they're just kind of out there, and that for me, a big part of who I am is and has and it's become that way is just a real compassion for humans, and especially when something or some culture or group has been wronged and they've been taken advantage of, and um, that's kind of a real sense of where my heart comes from of working on these types of things. I was asking my wife Kelly before coming here today, and I was like, honey, it's like, tell me what you think. Tell me just your thoughts. And she usually won't. And she's like, yeah, but my world for a long time has revolved around communication and problem solving. And it's come from having, when I was working my way through college here in Oklahoma City, I worked at the Feller Schneider Law Firm in the First National Center, and for 4.5 years, worked my way through college, graduated from University of Central Oklahoma. And because my grandfather, then my mother's family, he had moved there in 1924. And so he was an attorney, and he was right in the middle of the oil industry. But he was right in the middle of a lot of other things that are some of what I'm going to talk about today that has to do with our 39 tribes and the culture rich place that we live that there's really nothing like. And the more that I have spent time going to our tribal cultural centers, getting out through our state, talking to people in rural parts of the state, and one of the big things that Oklahoma is blessed with is water. And it's not by coincidence. The thing is that they just got into a mode in the 60s and prior into building dams and just building more and more. We have 4,700 dams in the state of Oklahoma. And the backside of that is we've manipulated the natural design of this state like no other. And that's just one aspect of it. There's the only lakes, natural lakes that we have here in Oklahoma are Oxbow. I can't recall the other, and they're basically it's just when you get a bend in a river and you get a flood and water pushes out and creates kind of an estuary or something on the side. But 200 of our lakes are man-made by damming rivers. Tragedy in it all, what I've come to learn and things I've been working on now for 6 years since I've been back is the amount of environmental damage we've done to the water. And the most valuable thing this state has outside of people is water. And it is more valuable than all the value of oil for the rest of time. And the squandering and the manipulation and the corruption that's gone into how badly it has polluted our tribal reservations, the scenic rivers, and things that I've learned about that I had never even heard about before coming home to Oklahoma. One of those Superfund sites. Superfund site is where, a location that is usually an industrial site. Usually they're dealing with toxic things, whether it's oil or chemicals or whatever. If they shut one down, then it basically is that they polluted that land where that is so badly that humans can't even be on it at all. And so we have a really big one that has been around for a while, and it has to do with mining. Whenever you mine and you dig into this earth and you start taking things out, and they were taking lead and zinc out of mining that was in northeast Oklahoma. That's where Tar Creek is. And there's a part of it that we can look back on history and understand that how much did they know about what they were doing and the damage that they were causing. But then other is how much did the persons that were profiting from it know what they were doing and the damage they were causing. And to definitely not to understand the level of what happened there when they stopped mining up there in the 70s, and the all of the chemicals that come from Lincoln's Ed, once they're out in the open, then get into the aquifers and get into the waterways, and it is toxic pollution, and to the fish, to anybody around it. And the real thing that, as I've come to understand, that's really concerns me is how little we've done to protect the Oklahomans that live in these areas that have been dying of cancer and having medical issues throughout generations of people now in parts of our state. And I really got a sense when I talk to people in the rural communities of how much they're on their own. And they actually believe that all these things that they're doing environmentally and taking of water and all this stuff, they feel like they're just being forced to move to the big city and to be in an area rather than living generationally in a place that they've had for 5 generations. And now things are happening to them that they have no control over. And that's the sadness of this state, because it's been happening before it was a state. The one thing that I learned, which my father had got polio when he was 9 years old. He's passed in 2012, but he was a big unknown inspiration in many different forms to me, because he he got polio when he was 9, and they lived in a tiny farm in southeast Kansas in a little place called Neodesha, and they didn't know what to do with people at the time that he got polio. They were putting people in full body casts and just all kinds of things. They were trying to be able to help people heal or get out of this. But that he literally survived this. There's no air conditioning, there's no nothing. And that I can't imagine being in a full body cast in the summertime in southeast Kansas. And so then, I think his mother is where we get our Cherokee ancestry from. And my grandmother was born 2 years prior to Oklahoma becoming a state. And so, for those of you that are familiar with the Dawes Act, where it was just the next manipulation of taking more land from where they pushed all these people to open it up. And the one thing I've come to understand is that whole impetus of removing the tribes from last place they were told they would have to go, and that's nobody bother them again, is creating these little boxes that they put on top of Cherokee Nation and throughout the five civilized tribes. The whole thing is tribes are based in community living. They don't like live like people in their own, this is my property, this is your property. None of it's property. It's just our space that we live and we take care of while we're alive. So the next generation can move it forward. It's colossally the opposite thinking of colonialism and everything that's played out here. The other thing that, when I really, when it really hit me and I got involved with the environmental, anything environmental, was we were living in Carmel by the Sea, California, and worked in lifestyle sports industry for over 30 years now, and in many different forms as a coach, as a business owner. I've created multiple businesses and just kind of been very fortunate to be at the front end of new sports as they happen, dealing with professional athletes and helping other companies build businesses within that form. But the whole nature of working in that is I perpetually outside and always connected to the land and the water, and you really have a sense of it. And when you're in the ocean, and that's a normal part of your lifestyle, which it's great being a kid from Oklahoma that's a surfer, is I never passed it up of like being where I was at and learning new things and challenging myself. But being in a liquid environment, you're really like baptism. It's like a renewal. Water is that to humans. It always has been. It's about the sanctity, how we view it, how we feel after we're in it or around it, and so I started working on what I was seeing happening in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and it was as much as you see photos of all this beautiful place, Pebble Beach, Carmel, all this stuff, and you think it's really that is just amazing. But it's like most things. If you get closer to it, you get in it, you start to see it's the same. The amount of over tourism, the amount of people coming into small communities that were never set up with an infrastructure to handle that much pollution and trash and people. And it was literally destroying some of these beautiful spaces. And so one day it kind of clicked where I'd met someone with the Surfrider Foundation, which does environmental work with our oceans all around the world, and they're based in Southern California. And I got a thorough explanation of what plastics were doing in the ocean and how that was harming marine life, and how much of this stuff has been pumped in. And at some point, I just kind of made a decision, a personal decision, that I was going to give my very best to problem solve the issues that I'm starting to understand. I just made a decision. And I think for all of us, when we move one step closer to doing things that will make a difference in the world, this path is selfless. This path is about you are conscious of caring about of all these other things that you really in your heart can't believe we are killing and destroying. And one of the things that I was very fortunate is being in the Monterey Bay in that area, you just have lots of whales. You have everything. Orcas, blue whales, and I had something put on my heart this morning. I have so many stories of everything that I experienced when I was out there, but one of the things that came up after the plastic, that was when we had the same person in office back in 2016, 17. and you could see that people would come into the the Monterey Bay, and people think Monterey or national marine sanctuaries are like our national parks, and they are 100% not at all. It is everybody, and what happened was, I've been a race commentator in endurance sports, and that's been a part of my life for 25 years. And so I was getting ready to go do an event out of town, and something strange was happening that no one had seen. I don't think anybody had seen in years. There were whaling still in the Monterey Bay Area and all that up until 1929. And the thing that most people I never understood, but I work really hard at understanding details to be able to be really articulate and to help people understand things just in a different way through experiences that I've had. And so there were like 20 humpback whales right off of Carmel Beach. And there's a Stillwater Cove, which is a pebble beach. And no one that had lived there for years had ever seen this many whales come this close to shore, because whales can live up to 200 years old. So if you think the amount of history and everything you're carrying, if you've been on this planet 200 years, they learned over years to not get in close to shore in that area because that's of them whaling. So they would always stay way further out in the ocean, going back and forth. And over time, as they realized that it was safe, that they could get closer to the shore, they started coming in. So 20 humpback whales have a massive school of fish cornered, and they'll just sit there and eat until it's gone and then move on. And and so I just kind of said to myself as I was leaving to go out of town that if they're still here when I get back, I'm going to go out there. And so I have paddleboard business out there, and I was a guide, and I take people out into the Monterey Bay. And so I come back, they're there. I grab a 14-foot paddleboard, grab 2 GoPros, and go to Stillwater Cove, get in the water. And it was mind blowing. It was life changing. And I'll tell you why is I had no fear about going out. You kind of, there's just a sensibility about knowing what being afraid of something or not. And so I knew enough, and being a surfer, you learn what's under the water because that's what creates waves and everything else. So where not to be and where to be. So I paddle out, I follow the kelp beds, and you have massive kelp beds that they can grow 16 inches a day if it's sunny outside. And and I could hear out in the distance, it almost sounded like aliens. It was just these noises, like creaking old ships and stuff. And it was a pot of these humpbacks lunch feeding. They blow all the bubbles under it, drive the fish to the top, and then they all come up all at once, open their mouths, and all this stuff comes in. And I had these whales coming by me as I stayed put on a kelp bed. Nothing can get under me. And they kept coming over to me, like from that corner of the room close to me. And the thing that really is, I don't know, changes you in a different way is when you hear something breathe, and the whole thing, when a whale takes a breath or spouts, that air is coming out at 300 miles an hour. And it is super loud. And you're just watching these majestic creatures, and they're right in front of me going by, and I'm listening to them breathe, and they're just interested in me. And it was me by myself out there for like over 2 hours. Nobody's like seeing this, and I'm just out there on the kelp bed. And then 2 guys came over from Point Lobos, a park just south of there. And of all things, I'm standing there on my board, and I'm looking this way, And all of a sudden, a humpback whale right at the edge of the kelp bed spy hops. And that's when they come out of the water and they intentionally, white sharks do it, whales do it, orcas, they can stick their head out of the water to see what's on the surface. And one came up that's right about at that wall. He comes up and I turn, all this is on tape and I'm videoing, and it blows out and I like look it right in the eye. And for whatever it is, and to me, everything I do, it's just God presents me with things and then puts it on my heart. And then I really have done my best throughout my life to just do God's will and whatever that next thing is. And it probably won't make sense to most people of the things that I'm going to do, besides that I know I'm supposed to. And that connection was like, we're responsible. We're responsible to take care of these majestic creatures. And it's shocking that we do these things that are we just destroy things, and the things that bring us great joy, and the things that we can't live without, like water. And it's just amazing how much greed and corruption sees none of it, and just leaves a wake of destroying things behind it. Uh, the next thing that was instrumental in all this was, if any of you saw what happened at the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in North Dakota, I wasn't really understanding my Cherokee background and ancestry at that point yet. But for some reason, sitting in Carmel, I was watching what was happening at Standing Rock, and it was just eating at me. And I mean, I'd never had a feeling like this that was like internal, like it was about to make me sick, that this is happening to these people after all this on their own land, and they're trying to run an oil line. And I was like, this is just wrong. So I'm feeling that, seeing that. My mother passes away. My grandfather, that was an attorney in Tulsa. Well, being an attorney in the oil industry, he had mineral rights. He'd gotten tons of them all throughout the country. And so me and my sister were willed these mineral rights. So Standing Rock's happening. I see that. And now my wife gets cancer. And now I am helping my wife as she is going through cancer. And I'm really involved with understanding, like working on ocean things. And this whole thing in a whole nother part was just really disturbing to me. And as I started to do the due diligence on my mother's will and these oil mineral rights and all that stuff, I really wanted to understand it completely. And as I start to vet through all these different locations, I find that we have 13 sites of mineral rights in Mount Trail County, North Dakota, the start of the Dakota Access Pipeline location. God has been doing that throughout my life of putting things in front of me that has just told me I'm doing what I'm supposed to. And once I've understood something, then I get something else put in front of me. And then I go learn, and I connect with people, and I listen, and I try to understand the situation better. And I went up there to Standing Rock after my wife got cleared of cancer. And I met with the person in charge of water for the tribe. And that person sat there and spoke to me for 3 hours, explaining what happened during Standing Rock. And then I got introduced to a sitting judge and the PR person for the tribe. And she stopped and took time and talked to me for 2 hours of explaining and answering questions. And some of the things that they had said to me were some of the most prolific things I've ever heard. They told me, Brent, when all this was happening and our people were in front of barbed wire and tack dogs and hoses and rubber bullets, our people were told to pray for the people on the other side of that. That's what they're told their people, that's what is our job to do. And when I was talking to the PR person, I I said, I really have never been in a situation, I've never been on a reservation to even ask someone some of these questions. How could you trust anybody ever about anything with all that has happened? And she said, Brent, if people come straight to us with honorable intentions, we accept them with open arms. And I'm like, wow. And my thoughts were of learning all this, knowing what had happened, that these are some of the most honorable people I've ever met in my life. The way they carry themselves and the way they hold themselves is so beyond anything I've ever heard that I was beyond inspired. And now I'm looking at, we're 24 minutes in. The things I want to touch on that more people can hear because it's necessary, the due diligence and from different newspapers that are independent that now are really telling truth stories about what's happening on our strait. The frontier is one. And so one of the most current things that anybody that had ever seen is they got a map that shows all of the drilling in Oklahoma that's happened. And so if you think first commercial well, 1889, we're in 2026, 500,000 oil wells drilled here. What nobody understood, and which makes perfect sense, is they really didn't know how to cap things, earlier days and even present of locking down wells once they're closed. So the amount of oil and toxic and everything, one way or another, the whole center mass of Oklahoma, these things have been leaking into the aquifers, people's groundwater, the land. People have been dying of cancer and all of this. And it just is background. Nobody even like it's a word about it. If I lived here and never really in the things like now, um, I probably wouldn't either. I always have to be a realist if I never left Oklahoma and I didn't know these things because every time I tell people that are here, none of them have ever heard these things. The next thing that is one of the most practical things that is destroying the water in our strait, the land, or factory farming. And factory farming is not farming. Factory farming is criminal to how they deal with animals. The animals will never see the light of day, and the health of that meat is 100% not even close to what it should be if these animals were outside. But they're not having laws, and they were, sued about this in 2008. That when they put these big houses in place, the smell is so bad you can't even live within miles of them, and it destroys the real estate value of everything that's around it. But then all of the pollution that comes from the chickens and their waste and hogs and chemicals, every time we get big rains, that stuff gets flooded into the creeks, into our scenic rivers and blue-green algae. And it is destroying our aquifers, our scenic rivers. And now we're finally starting to see the light of day on maybe getting this corrected because it makes no sense building the state on sustainability and getting people outdoors. We need it like we need air of being in nature. And the thing that I really just keep, and I keep it simple, is God gave us this unbelievable place called Earth to live. And it's so beautiful and it's so unbelievable. And all the living creatures all have a reason in a space, and we're destroying it. And a lot of this has been done based on having 39 reservations of sovereign nations here in a state, and they still just want to destroy the Native Americans. And so these are subtle ways that they've been doing it. In a simple term, when I got back here and I was the lifestyle director at the Olympic training site, and I set up a nonprofit for them that under their nonprofit called the River Protectors. And it was about accountability about the amount of plastic and styrofoam flooding into an Olympic training site in the United States of America. And and so the whole impetus was using an app that actually allows you to collect data by cleaning up, leaves GPS locations, and it allows you to quantify information and present it to this is what these things are doing to our state. In a simple term, it's another type of oil spill. All this polystyrene, all this plastic, and as it breaks into microplastics and micropolystyrene, it's that bad here. It has already worked its way into the soil, and that means it is throughout nature, the fish, birds that eat the fish, and it plays its way out. And so this year was the first year I decided after doing this work to really start presenting the hard facts of where we stand and taking a true inventory of what we're faced with. And it's not motivated by hate. It's not motivated by anything other than we can never move this place that 4 million people live forward and creating a healthy environment. And when you have a healthy environment, you usually have healthy people. You have an unhealthy environment, opposite, of starting to become proactive in spaces and pieces. And so just like fertile ground, that's just one example of doing the right thing, creating a smart business that, in God's time, you're just like, when is something just maybe going to finally break? And you're doing all this work and it just doesn't seem like anything's happening. But at 60, I just take it in stride that my job is to do the work. My job is to be a good communicator. My job is to stand up for people that are being taken advantage of. My job is to speak for the outdoors and nature and all these things that have no choice. And so the thing that happened back in Monterey to finish that was right when we moved back to Oklahoma in 2020. That spring, I get a call and say, Brent, I think we've shut it down. The cruise ship industry to coming into Monterey Bay. And this was a lot of work, a lot of things, and a small group of people that, were committed to change. And one of the last things I want to say is one of the most important things for all of us is the example we're setting for the youth and the mentoring of the youth. When I built Protect Monterey Bay, that nonprofit in California, we intentionally put 4 teenagers on the board of directors. And we intentionally helped them become comfortable speaking in group settings to adults. And we help them realize that their voice is creates more impact than adults most of the time. Anytime those kids got up there and spoke the truth to the adults at the city councils, we changed things. And so it's God's way that I spent all this time working on these things, but I knew that chapter was over and I was supposed to come here. I didn't know quite everything I was going to be doing here, but now it's 6 years into a cultural movement to really work with our tribes to put high focus on doing everything we can in each one of the reservations to create a more environmentally friendly design and to start to build and heal our land here. And so one step at a time, we're very fortunate, that the Cherokee Nation, you really never know what they're taking from you or not taking from you. And it's a strange thing that I'm just, you just have to learn and work through. But Chief Hoskins is, with the second largest tribe in the country, he was the first, and our tribe was the first to stop buying single-use plastics for the tribe. And he put that down as an executive order in 2024. And they built a youth group for climate change and started being proactive about all these things. The following year on Earth Day, they said, we're not going to buy polystyrene anymore. And so they are setting an example. And because they're all sovereign nations, they can make their own decisions about what they do. They're not guarded by whatever the laws are here, and can do the right thing. So I'm hopeful that in 2026, we will start to create a ripple effect, and more of the tribes can do these smart, simple things to start changing our, healing our land and water. And they think the long game, and everything that's colonialism is short game. How much can you take? And doesn't matter what you leave behind destroyed. It's the opposing part. So when you have 60% of the workforce in Oklahoma that are working for the tribes, and that they bring in 23 billion into this state, our odds are pretty good that if all of them just start doing a little something, we'll create a great deal of change. And so, tell Terry, I've told people all the time, it's like, would you like to speak? Would you like to whatever? And when I said at the beginning, when I said I took responsibility that I was going to create change and do the work, that meant saying yes to when you have options and opportunities to talk to more people and continue to work on being able to articulate and do a good job of explaining details. And so more people know, so they can tell more people, and it goes from there. The only thing that you can see if you want to look at any of, if you're on Instagram, you just pull up Respect the Land Oklahoma. And I did that intentionally, where I didn't want to create another nonprofit. I wanted to do something different. And the last thing, I leave with you is the thing that I see in Oklahoma is we just have to do the things that have never been done before, and create things that are necessary for us to even live here, and not destroy the place that we live. And we've just lost sight of it, period. So if everybody just does a little something, whether you're composting or you're using a reusable thing, it all adds up, and it all makes a difference, and it all counts. And people think that it doesn't, but it's how it works, one step at a time. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brent.
You bet.
Okay, so we're going to do reflection time, and our tradition here is we can reflect anyway on the message today. And so if it resonates in a certain way, if we want to ask a question, we can do that. Brent, if you want to kind of give any information, or if anyone has any questions, it's more of an open dialogue that we can have in this space right now. So would anybody want to jump in with anything that they thought of?
I can tell you some primary things that are happening right now that you can do something about. And some of it's just simply sending emails to representatives at the Capitol. One of the things that is a Senate bill that's up right now is the southeastern quadrant of Oklahoma, which is pretty much the Choctaw Nation. As there's a Senate bill up to create the first ever southeastern Oklahoma Scenic River Commission, and for them to establish protections around the Kiamichi River, which is absolutely unique, real truly in the United States of America. The things that live in that water space, the Mountain Fork River, which is in McCurtain County and Beaver Bend and all that, Lee Creek, and I have to think of the other one. Oh, Glover River. Glover River, believe it or not, there's only two rivers in the state of Oklahoma that have not been dammed.
Wow.
Two. It's the Benton River and the Blue River. Glover River in the Choctaw Nation, Blue River in the Chickasaw Nation. The second thing is this lawsuit that's been playing out. And that's an issue. We just live in such a litigious society of never doing anything but allowing politicians and attorneys to just keep things in no man's land. is it looks to be that they are doing settlements to shut down and these chicken houses and these primary companies to start paying to clean all this up. And so each of those companies are coming in right now and going through their agreements about what they're going to pay, what they're going to do, and that is massive. And because it's gone on for this long. But the one thing I've learned is things will stay in the dark until you start investing time and energy putting things into the light. And that's how evil, all these things that are not good for anything, the way they want it. So the more you tell, the more people know and are aware of these things, then that's when you get we the people. And that is absolutely necessary to create change. The thing that I don't know if I was surprised, but I never thought about it as much till I got here and then I started doing some of this, of how much people living in Oklahoma lived in fear. Fear of not talking about things, fear of sticking out, or about anything with the oil industry. When I've been in positions, Brent, don't say this, don't say that. And I'm like, how are we gonna change? I'm not, God told us we're not here to live in fear, period, period. And so, you just, you face things, you talk about things, you let more people understand that we really are the decision makers of what happens. And that every time we make one more step forward that creates another successful outcome, it builds on its own equity and people realize we can change the world. And it always starts with where you live. Yeah.
So speaking of that, my father and grandfather are both ranchers and farmers, and in northeastern Montana, and so and they're an energy company or country, so they're right by the Bakken. They're in North Dakota. You talked about Montreal County there, and they've gotten kind of comfortable with it. This was just happened this weekend. It was so bizarre. So they've just gotten really comfortable with the fact that there's a lot of oil production going on there, and so a friend from high school who is still up there and is farming and ranching, um, put on social media some kind of an announcement. There's a company or not a company. It's a lobbying group, special interest group. I need to get more information on it. But anyways, apparently they've been going around talking about the health impacts of wind energy. And I didn't know anything about this. And so I decided to look it up. And apparently this is ideas that like as turbines move, they generate some kind of thing. It doesn't sound real to me. Anyway, but they're taking this very seriously. And they're mounting opposition, and I have to believe that the energy industry, you were talking about telling the truth and not living in fear. I have to believe the energy industry is involved in this somehow. You know,
Always.
yeah,
Yeah, that happened with me. Not with me, but I was part of that. Oh, it was a little fellowship program, kind of leadership program put on by the Nature Conservancy, and they had a program up where they would take the group, statewide group. We go visit the Tallgrass Prairie up in like Pawhuska area, where they have a huge reserve.
Yep.
And like it started to feel like an infomercial for all of the ways we have to be careful with wind energy. Like they had gotten a lot of money, the Nature Conservancy had been given a lot of money by the oil industry to come up with safe ways to develop wind energy. And they're talking about, oh, you know, there are certain birds that are impacted by the windmills. And it's true that, I mean, the greater, what is it, the greater prairie chicken or lesser prairie chicken, I don't know which one it is. Like it's a kind of a bird that I guess has to be far enough away from trees and like tall things, because hawks, you know, perching bird like predators, like they build their nest far enough away so that a hawk can't see their nest, and that these windmills were now, a problem for the prairie chicken because of this new, vertical space that would keep them from having nesting areas. And so, we're going here to this nature conservancy thing, talking about all of the like problems with the wind industry, and not a mumbling word about the oil and gas like that's already built out in all these fields. There's pump jacks running everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. And like several of us just started asking questions like, okay, yeah, let's talk about the impacts of wind energy, but why are we not talking about the impacts of the oil and gas industry that's right here? Like, is that not also a concern? And the Nature Conservancy was kind of like, well, we got to work with people in Oklahoma. Well, and it's like, yeah, we got to work. You want their money, and they don't want anybody asking questions. This is a beautiful like relationship here. And yeah, for all of us, we're just here these like, passive little, people getting propaganda about how dangerous the wind energy is and what industry is. But yeah, so much of like what happens in the state is like corporate power and politics, and like who's making money, who's gonna have to make less profit. It's pretty wild. I did hear though that I was concerned, like what was gonna happen with all of the poultry, like this appeal that finally was resolved in December. And the poultry industry was like threatening to pull out. We're not going to be able to afford to operate in Oklahoma now that the state is requiring them to pay for all of their pollution. But it sounds like they've settled
they're working on the settlements, and the whole thing is everything is so backwards and it's just crazy. Is the big companies basically say, we will contract you and your space, and you build all these chicken houses and do all this stuff, and it's at your cost. And if you aren't fitting what we ask you to do, we'll just pull the plug. And so the way I just talk about all of it is Vegas is always going to end up with the money, and it's no different. The big companies are going to always end up with the money, and they could care less about the humans that are going to have to file bankruptcy. That is the last thing. They just cut them off. They're like sharecroppers from in the past. They get stuck with the bill. The big company just doesn't mean anything. So they have destroyed rural Oklahoma with these farms. They're not farms. I mean, it's just this, it's horrible. And it's the last thing this state needs. This has been in an extractive state before it was a state. They knew there was oil here before it was a state, and they were already drilling and plugging oil wells before 1907. And when you look at all the land that was opened up from the Dawes Act, you want to see where all those oil wells are? Pretty much all of them, except for the Osage. And the only reason Osage Nation isn't a part is the Osage Nation, when they were above in Kansas, and all these tribes have been moved, not just once, but multiple times. The Osage finally said, if we move here, we're going to buy it, and we are not going to get moved ever again. And they think they're putting all these tribes in this desolate no man's land, and of all things, they plop this tribe right on what they put them on. But then when you see what happened from it, which is the swindlers, the people, how fast can we kill these and destroy these people and take what they have here? And that's what happened with the allotment of all the 5 civilized tribes. That my grandmother was 2 when she got her allotment. And so they would have people come in and get as many young kids as possible as their guardian to make the decisions. And they just swindle all this stuff out. It was a massive scam. And that's why it happened. if you look at Georgia, you know, when Andrew Jackson created the Indian Removal Act, because they found gold in Georgia. It's like, nope, you guys got to get out of here. And if it was gold in the Black Hills and the Lakota, nope, you know, we're just going to take it. California, gold. We're just, you know, and that is the impetus of colonialism around this planet. It's the same process, different space, and that's why, you know, coming back to Oklahoma, my first thought was, as I started to understand certain things a little better, was this is going to be a challenge, and I'm like, I'm okay with that. So get to work and just it's vigilance. And if you're doing it for ego or pride, you're in the wrong space, because it's just about doing the right thing, and it's selfless, and it's because you care about other people and people that have been taken advantage of and people that have died because of these things with illnesses, and it's unacceptable. And so we all have, you know, something. And a lot of times I always, for what I do, I just pray about stuff, and whatever God puts on my heart to do, then I get to work and do it in pieces.
It's interesting you mentioned colonialism as being short-sighted, not terribly concerned with legacy. Um, I don't know like where we are with it here in Oklahoma. They may be coming up, but in North Dakota, I lived there for years. They've got, I don't know if they've got data centers up yet, but they've got plans for it. If not, I think they've actually built some data centers. It'd be really interesting to see what happens with water policy coming up because of the cooling that's needed for these data centers that are coming up. And when I was in Nebraska, one of the biggest issues was water policy to the Ogallala Aquifer specifically being stressed, and that was back in the 20 teens, like early 20 teens, and I don't think it's gotten any better. And I don't know, when I just look at the data centers, I think the same thing. It's just this is for now. This is like they're doing this for right now to make a profit for right now. I'm really worried about access to water in general. And I don't know, I'm not entirely sure how tribes are looking at this, but I mean, like you said, water is just so key to who we are as people. And we kind of think of it as this free thing that we just get and we get to have and do whatever we want with, but that it's probably one of, like you said, after humans, that is the most vital thing that we have. And we're using it in such a weird way to like generate AI centers. So unhuman.
One of the craziest stories I heard, and it was hard to believe. It was like a script out of a movie. And they were talking about a company was trying to put a hydroelectric plant over off the Kiamichi. And Kiamichi is a seasonal river now because of how much water has been taken from it. And so they dug into this whole thing. And literally what's really happening is when we opened up for foreign entities to purchase land to farm in Oklahoma in 1991, well, they just figured out over time we can come in, offer people that have no money that live in rural Oklahoma and offer them twice the value of it. And if you have nothing, you know, it's pretty easy to say yes to getting some money. And they've been buying up land. And the story of what was this hydroelectric plant is they're just testing the legal system of what they can get away with. So the crazy story that went with this is the company, the people that were doing this work to create this hydroelectric plant were a shell company with their finances in the Cayman Islands, and it was being financed by the Chinese Communist Party. This is Oklahoma.
Wow.
And it's real and it's right. And I'm like sitting there going, nobody just kind of thought this, we might need to check into these things. And it's been going on. And I was told that when I first moved back, and my first thought was, in Oklahoma, and why hasn't anybody kind of said anything?
Yeah.
But it's a cultural thing of just keep to yourself. But it's,
We'll let the lobbyists in the state government tell us
yeah.
how things should be.
Yeah.
Well, dealing with water shortage, you know, there's a drought factor in Oklahoma now. And my brother-in-law, who knows a lot about some of the issues, he worked for State Parks Department for many years, and he just knows a lot about some of these issues, and he is very concerned about both locally and out in southwestern Oklahoma, that development is outpacing the water that's there.
You can't do it. You can't do anything without water, literally.
But it's governmental entities that make the decisions to allow it or not allow it, or have guidance factors in place. Where, if you were concerned about that, where would you look locally to say, should they be building vast amounts of housing areas in west of Deer Creek? Is the water there? I mean, who finds out? Who makes the decisions?
Well, the other thing that no one's really shown, because no one wants to know, but the oil industry doesn't want anybody to know, is how much they've destroyed the aquifers and polluted all of our groundwater. And Oklahoma has always been about keep making stuff, keep making things look as if, but never play the long game. Never think about what's it going to cost, in the long run to take care of something, and anything about sustainability. As soon as you get money, you spend it, you do whatever. And the tribes are the exact opposite. It's like everything they're doing is investing in their people. They're investing in the health of their people. They're investing in their kids. They're investing in education. They're investing in, and so the answer to your question is the Water Resources Board. The Water Resources Board for the state of Oklahoma is antiquated, big time. It needs a full vetting and audit and a redesign of how we view giving out water in the state of Oklahoma. And there's no way around it. And so that is a primary point. And it was just like, I've met people from the Department of Environmental Education for environmental quality. And when I first started talking to them, they told me this, Brent, it's like, we weren't even allowed to use the word sustainability. I mean, I'm just thinking, you can't, that's how far crazy we are. Not even use a term. They're not allowed to use the words climate change. We are, and it's like when we talk about the old guard, they want to keep things just like it is. They don't want to see one thing change because that's their money. And they do not care about everybody else. And there's a lot of the haves and have-nots. And for us to ever get anywhere, it's like even in Tulsa, they created a whitewater park next to the gathering. They created these beautifications and just insane. It's so great. But no one wants to deal with the reality that on the west bank of the Arkansas River is oil refineries and chemical refineries, and they're probably Superfund sites that are just never been closed yet. And that whole section of land that seeps, this stuff seeping into the Arkansas River, then hitting that is, they don't want to talk about it. And the thing that really bothered me, and I found another investigative journalist that had really dug into this whole thing deep, was I was a police officer in Tulsa. It was the first thing I did out of college. And they had built public housing there on that west bank, beautiful houses off the river. But I bet you dollars to donuts, they're sitting on a toxic wasteland. and I bet you these people are getting cancer. And because they want to hurry up, build stuff, get people, get the money, and be done with it.
They
Move
grow
on.
the problem.
And so I don't think, and even where they're putting, want to put one of the data centers in up the river, can't remember the name of town right now. They want to put it near the Arkansas River. So the water they would have to be resourcing is polluted, you know. I'm like, where are you going to get the water from? And if that water is toxic, polluted, does that work with all the water you need to cool these things? I would suspect it has to be pretty doggone clean.
Yeah.
And so that's what I believe. They think they can put these things here, but I'm like, I bet you the groundwater, all the places you want to put them, it's polluted. And until somebody starts really testing the waters in these areas, nobody wants to touch it. There's a gentleman I met that I guess is a professor or teacher at Oklahoma State, OSU Tech. And on March 30th, I've got it on Respect Land. He's doing a class on the Oklahoma aquifers for 2 hours. Like it's open to the public from 12 to 2 on the 30th. And this is how you slowly get all the pieces to a puzzle. You get people that are with the universities and colleges. We have so much stuff that we could get money for by studying the place we live, because it is so uniquely polluted in such an unusual situation, and how much money these universities and colleges can get in grants and everything else to study all this, whether it's fish, the land. There's solutions and there's a financial design to all of it. It's just moving us out of, like what you were saying, Terry. As soon as you start talking about whatever they are, they're going to redirect.
Yeah.
Always, they're going to redirect to something else. They're never going to have any clarity on their responsibility and what they've done. They're going to do everything they can to have you look there, everywhere else.
So I work at OU, and I know people who work with like sustainable energy and those kinds of things. And what's really different about the administration this time is with the grants, they can't even use the word climate change if they want to apply for a grant to study it.
That's what I'm doing.
You know,
Yeah, that's where like
It's woke.
yeah,
nuts.
yeah. And so it's like, how do you even write a grant when you can't explain what it is you want to do? Yeah.
It's a challenging time, but I always say it's like, you know, the challenging times that we have in life is usually where we learn the most. And right now we're probably learning more than anybody's ever done, you know, in their lifetime, about everything that we need to do to never allow this kind of thing to ever happen again. And put protections and designs that we've never had to implement, but we're really seeing how bad it can be. And when they want to destroy public lands and they want to sell off all this stuff, it's like, this is just crazy. It's insanity.
You just talked about like young people. I thought that was really cool that you guys help young people kind of find, not that they don't have the ability to themselves, just like kind of find their voice a little bit and be able to communicate in a way, because it is hard. It's intimidating. So I work with young people all the time. What's interesting is I find these 20-year-olds, they're really nervous about AI and about the environmental aspect of it, but also like the prospect of job loss. And you'd think that maybe they'd be the ones that are more okay with the idea because they're more tech savvy, but that's not what I'm finding at all. I think they're really nervous about this because they've got more skin in the game. They're going to be here longer. They've got to figure out what's my next 50, 60 years look like, you know, in a way that we don't. Matters.
Yeah, and these jobs they're disappearing in a matter of like 2 years. Like kids that are in college right now are not going to be able to find jobs if they're in these areas where it's just absolute shredding their society. It's about to make a change, and it feels like inevitable. You know, it's that feel, you know, where all the people with money and the advertisements you see, and it's like progress is marching on. You know, this is the new reality. Everybody just get with the picture.
Almost like we don't have a choice. I mean, that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, but that's how it's always been sold. That's what Empire always does. They always say, we have the power. It's our say. It's a new day. It's a new era. You know, get on board with, you know, the Pax Romana, get on board with America, you know, get on board with West, you know, this settler colonialism. It's a new day. And it's a new day for them to cash in, and the rest of us just get to eat crap. And we have to be speaking up and making it uncomfortable. To go silently, yeah, is like exactly plays into their hand. To just, oh, you're right. Yeah, let's just all adjust.
But who's heard a single word about any of these issues in the gubernatorial scramble?
No, they want to talk about trans youth and. Yeah. Bizarre. Thank you for the overall message of like, we just need to keep talking. I really appreciate that. This gives me, I'm gonna keep talking. So, well, once spring break's over, I'll go back and talk to students. I know they're probably on a beach somewhere. Having the time of their lives. All right, anyways, that being said, let's go ahead and transition into joys and concerns. So if we have a joy, we always end it with thanks be to God. If we have a concern, we end it with Lord, hear our prayer.